maybe one of the top 3 most difficult defeats this team has seen in the last 25 years.
What you see here is every qualifying choke from the 2025 college football season. If you missed last year's video, a qualifying choke satisfies 2 criteria in order to be considered. First, that the final score be within a single possession, and second, that the losing team achieve at least a 75% win probability per ESPN's metric. These chokes are then roughly sorted based on a formula I created called Raw Choke Score, or RCS for short. RCS is the result of a weighted average taken from different points throughout the second half of a game: the middle of the third, the end of the third, the middle of the fourth, the 2-minute warning, and the highest win probability obtained at any point throughout the second half. The higher weights obviously correlating with less time remaining. You might be thinking, aren't there more efficient ways to use win probability as a metric? And the answer to that is unequivocally yes. I even considered some alternatives mid-season when I wasn't happy with certain RCS output. But this is why I also use a qualitative analysis to filter through the fluff. This year in particular made it especially evident that context matters. For instance, college football's Jason Garrett blew a 30-3 halftime lead to Texas A&M, breaking all sorts of SEC records in the process. While it shouldn't come as a surprise that a 3-6 team lost to an at-the-time undefeated playoff contender, this South Carolina team was full of freaks. From preseason Heisman hopeful Lenora Sellers, to superstar edge Dylan Stewart, to track star Nick Harbor. It's miraculous they only won 4 games. However, any self-respecting Gamecock fan will tell you that despite the unprecedented defeat, this was still somehow par for the course. I know this all too well as an alumni of the University of South Carolina myself. If nothing else, 4 years rooting for a Will Muschamp coach team prepares you for just about anything. Well, almost anything.
It's now my honor and privilege to officially congratulate you as the newest alumni from the University of California. Congratulations, and please be seated. Carolina.
While those unfamiliar with the program texted me excited about the team playing to their potential and poised to take down the number 3 team in the country on the road, I warned them of the potential collapse. It didn't make the loss any easier to stomach, but I think my buddy's reaction summed things up perfectly. In reality, what I've learned after 2 seasons of analyzing chokes is that few teams are safe. 103 teams have squandered 75% odds over the past 2 years, even if by year's end you compete in the national championship. I also learned where RCS does its job. A collapse like Beamer's is evident by the end of the third quarter when the game is within 1 score. A true heartbreaker comes when the game feels over because it should be over, only for a team to inevitably get in their own way. This year, instead of going through the top 10 worst single game chokes, we're going to take a different approach. We'll still review the top 5, but we'll also look at the top 5 worst choking teams of the 2025 season. It's one thing to lose in a crushing manner as the blemish on an otherwise successful season. It's another thing for 75% of your losses to come in some form of disappointment, much like last year's Washington State team that choked 3 straight. Lastly, I've made a special top 5 for recipients of my new Kicky Award, named after the onside kick, which we all know is dead. To start, we'll take a look at our 5th place Kicky Award winner, New Mexico State. Returning customers will recall the Desert of Suck I coined last season. This barren football wasteland consists of 3 universities dotting the Rio Grande. These 3 universities each maintained some of the worst all-time win percentages in Division I FBS. However, last season, New Mexico State was largely ignored as we focus on UNM's choke to 2025 FCS national champions, Montana State, along with UTEP's efforts to help a young UTSA program, only for the Roadrunners to quickly achieve more than the Miners had in decades. New Mexico State recently achieved their first back-to-back winning season since 1967, thanks in part to efforts by head coach Jerry Kill and quarterback Diego Pavia, both of whom would leave for Vanderbilt following the 2023 campaign. Naturally, they'd regress in 2024, losing to both of their arch rivals in UNM and UTEP. They even found themselves in the top 25 worst chokes of 2024 after a brutal home loss to Liberty, but more on that in a second. Though, despite the lackluster on-field performance, I'm sure they took solace when rival Lobo breakout personnel all departed New Mexico for opportunities elsewhere. Quarterback Devin Dampier shined as he and his former Lobo offensive coordinator, Jason Beck, immediately found success at Utah, while former Lobo head coach, Bronco Mendenhall, led Utah State back to a bowl game. With a monstrous number of transfer departures, at least the Aggies' in-state partner in pain seemed primed to join them in the constant cycle of siphoned resources brought on by the current funnel of talent lost to the portal and poaching. Unfortunately, what NMSU fans couldn't have known is that the hiring of Jason Eck would spur the Lobos' third 9-win season since 2000, a mark the Aggies have only hit twice in the entire 92-season history of their program. Of course, this would mean New Mexico State would fall short when visiting UNM in the Battle of I-25, a game they'd race out to a quick 17-7 lead just to lose 38-20. However, for all the reasons that they could receive a kickie, the real cause would happen 2 weeks later during a visit to Lynchburg, Virginia, against none other than Liberty. See, last year's 30-24 loss to the Flames came after attaining a 92% win probability while maintaining a 9-point lead midway through the fourth quarter, only to give up 2 late touchdowns as part of a 21-point final frame by Liberty to leave Aggie fans apathetic. This season, NMSU would find themselves down 20-6 after the first half, but a Herculean third quarter allowed them to take a 7-point lead early in the fourth. With all the momentum in their favor, they'd force another punt, only to muff it for an impossible second time in this same game, allowing Liberty to kick an easy field goal. The NMSU defense was playing inspired though. Their 2 second-half turnovers allowed the Aggies to be in this position at all. They'd impressively held the Liberty offense to just 43 yards on 5 possessions since the break. They even stuffed the Flames after the fumble, forcing a quick 4th down to prompt the field goal attempt. Allowing only 200 yards to their opponents the entire game, the difference throughout was special teams.
Special teams, special plays, special players.
Liberty's first points came after a short NMSU punt resulted in the game's opening field goal. NMSU would answer with a field goal of their own, only to give up a kickoff return touchdown immediately after. The Aggies would then go 3 and out, but force the Flames to punt after 3 plays before the first muff punt. The resulting field position saw Liberty punch it in for a tud. NMSU's next possession would generate another 3 points just before the half, only to be flagged for unnecessary roughness on the kickoff, putting the home team near midfield, where they'd snag another 3 more. In summary, the Aggie special teams had now kicked a short punt for Liberty's first 3, allowed a kickoff return touchdown for 7, muffed 2 punts resulting in 10 more, and committed unnecessary roughness resulting in another 3, meaning that all 23 of Liberty's points could in some way be attributed to a failure on the special teams. All the while, the NMSU defense had more or less stifled their opponent's offense. NMSU would punt on their ensuing drive, and fortunately pin Liberty inside their own 10. With a 4-point lead, all that was left to do was get one more stop and pull off the upset as double-digit underdogs. Naturally, Decay would catch up to the Aggies, and Ethan Vasco would pull off the 3-minute, 92-yard touchdown drive to take a 3-point lead with just 36 seconds remaining. With little hope left, the NMSU offense would once again convert a massive 3rd down to get into field goal range with the opportunity to tie the game at the last second. Special teams are important, folks, because the NMSU kicker wouldn't even give this one a chance, poetically ending the game with another special teams failure, the 6.94 calculated RCS being worse than the 6.09 the Aggies achieved playing this team a season ago. One thing I love about these stories is how easy they segue together, because Liberty's success on this Tuesday night wouldn't save them from themselves. Despite pulling off the comeback against NMSU, the Flames would end the season with the 4th worst cumulative RCS in college football. Each of their 3 collapses came in the last 4 games of their 2025 campaign. In Week 11, after a wild 4th quarter fumble that saw the Flames escape with possession, they'd allow a 4-play game-winning drive to choke one to Missouri State. 2 weeks later, in Week 13, they blew a 2-touchdown 4th quarter lead to Louisiana Tech, only to throw an interception on the 2nd play of overtime, meaning that quarterback Ethan Vasco threw a pick on 4 of the Flames' final 5 drives. Finally, in Week 14, they'd get into a shootout with the first-place CUSA Kennesaw State Owls, a chance to maybe play spoiler and keep Kennesaw State from the conference title game. Liberty played well, but a missed 32-yard field goal attempt as time expired would send the game to extra innings, where they'd go on to lose in double overtime.
Kick on the way is up, and it is no good. He missed it. We go to overtime for the third straight week. He missed it from 32 yards out.
Going back to their Week 11 opponent, Missouri State, the Bears in their first season as an FBS program would be something of an arbiter of chaos, going 3-1 in qualifying matchups, but one thing that stood out to me was how difficult they made it to distinguish themselves from Mississippi State. Both schools can be abbreviated with MSU, though it is more common to see MOST for the new kids on the block. Further, they share a similar color scheme with their Starkville counterpart, brandishing maroon and white uniforms with an all-black alternate. And even the mascot simply being a bear shares the same first letter as the Mississippi State Bulldogs, just hopefully less cowbell. The similarities wouldn't end there. In Week 2, MSU pulled off a major upset against a 2024 playoff team that had maintained super high hopes in 2025 when they hosted Arizona State. A 4-0 start to the year would draw an excited sellout crowd for their matchup against 15th-ranked Tennessee. They'd even put the Vols on upset alert by going up 7 midway through the fourth. Sadly, fans in Davis-Wade would stay for overtime just to see their Bulldogs fall short. Understandably, there wouldn't be another sellout when returning to Starkville against the Longhorns. The 4-0 start had come crashing back down to earth after 3 straight losses. The Longhorns may have started the season ranked first by AP voters, but their season-long aspirations were hanging on by a thread after losses to Ohio State and Florida. And you'd expect Texas to be locked in against MSU. They got an emotional upset victory over Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry, but quite literally should have been beaten by Kentucky. It doesn't register as a choke because the Wildcats barely even had a positive win probability, but this was just brutal. Kentucky outgained Texas by over 200 yards, had 18 more first downs, was less penalized, and ended regulation with nearly 40 minutes of possession. Somehow, they still needed a last-second field goal just to tie the game and send it to OT. Pathetic. Congratulations to Kentucky boosters for coming up with that buyout money. Anyway, you'd think Texas wouldn't be sleepwalking into this game against MSU, considering their season almost ended in Lexington a week ago. To the dismay of those in Austin, State would enter the fourth quarter with a 31-14 lead and 90% chance of victory. Even though Texas would cap off a 5-play drive for a quick score, Chapin would hit Devon Booth for a 62-yard touchdown just 3 plays later to extend the advantage back to 17. But they earned this 5th-place ranking because Emmett Mosley would haul in a touchdown on Texas's next drive. You might remember him from last year's video when he caught 3 touchdowns for Stanford against Louisville. Chapin would then take 2 sacks en route to a 3-and-out, though a defensive stand on their own 5 would hold the Longhorns to a field goal. MSU would fail to pick up a single first down on their next drive, but did well to burn the clock. For all their flaws, the Texas offense is very capable of scoring quickly, but at least you'd put their backs against the wall. Unless you allow another massive punt return, this one going for a touchdown, ultimately tying the game, and after an unsuccessful attempt to cross midfield, this game would also go to overtime. In 3 plays, Emmett Mosley would catch his second touchdown pass of the night, and 3 straight incompletions followed by back-to-back false starts would bring this game to an end with a Blake Chapin fumble. Things weren't all bad for MSU though. The same can't be said for the team they'd get their lone conference win of the season against. After the turn of the century, Arkansas was gearing up to become one of the powerhouses of the SEC. Seriously, as much as that sounds like a joke now, they won 9 or more games in 5 of the 10 seasons between 2002 and 2011. During that 11-win 2011 campaign, they even peaked at number 3 in the BCS poll. Going into the Battle of the Boot, they could have caused a wild 3-way tie atop the SEC West standings, with each of number 1 Alabama, number 2 LSU, and number 3 Arkansas having gone 11-1 with wins against each other. Sadly for Team Chaos, they'd get blown out in Death Valley, allowing Saban to beat his old team in the national title game. But then Bobby happened.
Dang it, Bobby. I'm gonna kick your ass.
The one saving grace from Bielema's tenure had been how the Razorbacks would often find insane ways to pull victory out of their ass. It was uncanny. Unfortunately, Bielema took his sorcery with him to Illinois, and Arkansas has been paying a penance ever since. For all the times that they somehow won a game they shouldn't have, the football gods felt the need to punish them. First with 2-win Chad, and then for poor Sam Pittman. He started out strong, going a combined 16-10 in his first 2 years, only for the ghost of Bobby Petrino to catch up with him. In 2023, they would only beat one Power Conference team, with 5 of their first 6 losses coming in tight one-score games, including a 7-3 defeat at home to a Mississippi State team not even a full year removed from losing their iconic head coach. Last year, they'd choke a 21-7 halftime lead in Stillwater, but at least get to enjoy upsetting number 4 Tennessee in Donald W. Reynolds Stadium. 2025 was the least forgiving of all, though. On the heels of a crushing defeat to Ole Miss, they'd visit Memphis only to fumble the game away in position to win. Notre Dame showed no mercy, and was the last straw that broke Pittman's good graces. Petrino, as interim, would follow things up with back-to-back 3-point losses to top 15 teams, because even in a throwaway year, the Hogs still had to be punished. They'd go on to lose to LSU by a single point as well, all culminating in Arkansas being the 5th worst choking team of the 2025 season. Though of all the pain, one particular loss had to be the most Arkansan. I won't torture you with all the boring details of the game. It was more or less a shootout between 2 bad conference opponents. And though Arkansas has a 35-21 lead in the 4th quarter, they'd managed to lose in regulation as offensive guru Bobby Petrino's next 3 drives netted negative 14 yards, while the team as a whole managed to give up almost 200 yards in penalties. The one saving grace is that perhaps this loss, along with the fact that Petrino couldn't get a single win, led Arkansas to look elsewhere to fill their head coaching vacancy. They'd eventually land on Ryan Silverfield, conveniently the same Memphis coach that crushed their spirits early in the 2025 campaign. Memphis, a team that routinely finds themselves in competition for an American Conference championship, would now need to fill their own head coaching vacancy. So who do the Memphis Tigers go and hire? None other than our old pal Charles Huff. He's familiar for being responsible for the worst choke of the 2024 season while he helmed the ship at Marshall. Through 9 games, the Golden Eagles were 7-2 with their only losses coming to Mississippi State and an out-of-conference Louisiana Tech during the rivalry in Dixie. That left them undefeated in the Sun Belt with a chance for Charles Huff to win the same conference in back-to-back years with different schools. That was until Southern Miss ran into Texas State.
It's not what the doctor ordered.
And now they're just rubbing it in.
At the halfway point of the 2025 season, I already knew that Texas State would get their own segment at the end of the year. Even if by some divine intervention 5 other teams managed to surpass what they had cumulatively accomplished, it would be impossible to ignore their tail. See, a few months before the season, it was announced that Texas State would be leaving the Sun Belt to join the Pac-12 as part of the continued efforts to bring the old Power 5 group back to relevance. Texas State has been in the Sun Belt since their 2nd season in Division I FBS, after the conference extended an olive branch following the dissolution of the WAC in 2012. The Bobcats may have found some relevance the past few seasons, finishing both 23 and 24 8-5, including their first wins against in-state rival UTSA, but before then they were a total bottom feeder with an overall record of 40-92 in FBS. The Sun Belt would be sure to treat Texas State accordingly on their way out.
I broke up with my ex-girl. Here's a number.
In Week 6, Texas State would open Sun Belt play visiting Arkansas State. The teams would combine for 13 punts through the first 3 quarters, en route to a 10-10 tie. Even after both the Bobcats and Red Wolves would score on their opening possessions of the final frame, the best moment of the game would be awarded to the ASU long snapper.
Today's best moments. It's the long snapper. They're going to get about 6-7 yards.
The broadcasting crew couldn't have known that they'd experience exactly why they call it the Fun Belt. Now tied at 24, the Bobcats would get the ball with 1:20 remaining. The strategy should be obvious. Get the ball into field goal range, burn the clock, and kick a go-ahead field goal as time expires. On the first play of the series, a QB draw catches A-State off guard and gets the future Pac-12 team down to their opponent's 3. Game over, right? Though the Red Wolves have 3 timeouts, they're forced to use one after the chains are reset. Maybe it's cowardly to take the pro-gamer approach, but as far as I'm concerned, it's the best way to guarantee victory. You could even be disrespectful about it, kneel the ball twice. Force Bush Jones to use the last of his timeouts, run the ball on 3rd down. If you score, great. If not, kick the field goal and give ASU less than 30 seconds to try and match. Again, It's possible I'm way off base in this philosophy, but I think sometimes a 3-point lead with less time remaining is more valuable in these scenarios. If your opponent knows a field goal will tie it, their strategy changes. Instead of performing desperation maneuvers to find the end zone, they'll be more conservative knowing they could tie it. With a 7-point lead, your adversary could always score, then go for 2 and the win, especially if they have more time to work with and chances to stop the clock. But I don't get paid to coach for a reason, because Texas State dives right over the goal line on 1st and goal. If you ask me, I think the Bobcats started boozing before they headed back to San Marcos. It's patently obvious they were trying to let you score, evident by the A-State DB that throws his hands up to signal touchdown, thankful his team accomplished their goal so effortlessly. The football gods don't look kindly upon those that disrespect their gridiron chessboard, and for the only time this season, the Texas State kicker would miss an extra point.
We will see if that comes back to bite Texas State.
With no timeouts and needing a touchdown, Arkansas State would carve up the Bobcat defense, finding pay dirt with just 7 seconds to play. Their successful extra point, giving them the lead and the win in a game that proves so much worse than the 6.84 RCS earned by Texas State in Week 6. 2 weeks later in Week 8, Texas State would take a trip to Huntington, West Virginia for a matchup against the worst choking team of the past 2 seasons. Under Charles Huff, the Thundering Herd only choked 1 game last season. While it was the worst of the year, scoring a whopping 11.23 RCS, that loss against Georgia Southern would result in Huff's commitment to Braylon Braxton, resulting in them capturing the Sun Belt Championship. This season, where Tony Gibson wouldn't match his predecessor in magnitude, he'd make up for with volume. In Week 2, they'd fall to that chaotic Missouri State team, and then in Week 5, they'd really collapse against Louisiana, poetically again choking to a backup QB, much like how it happened last season. They'd fall late in 2025 as well against App State, which funnily would become the difference between them and Texas State as the worst choking teams of the past 2 seasons. Because on this particular night, what was another relatively normal game would be blown wide open by a questionable 4th down coaching decision. Nursing an 8-point advantage and less than 10 to play, G.J. Kinney would elect to call a fake punt on 4th and 4 from his own 26. As if the play call itself wasn't completely insane, the Bobcat punter would actually get right around the line to gain, likely picking up enough for the 1st down, only to take a massive shot and fumble the ball. It's as if the football gods wanted to say it was going to be a turnover no matter what. Texas State would hold Marshall to a field goal this time around, but after actually punting on their next drive, the Herd would march down the field and take a 3-point lead with just over a minute remaining. The Bobcats would do enough to get well into field goal range before Jackson takes a sack with no timeouts, forcing them to spike the ball on 3rd down and attempt a 50-yarder as time expires. He misses.
Psych! That's the wrong number!
Tony Gibson calls a timeout. It's a choke bowl after all. Both teams have to do enough to lose, because of course he drills it on the 2nd attempt. Both teams would score a touchdown in the 1st overtime, but the Bobcats would be forced to settle for 3 to open the 2nd. And of course, fireworks for Marshall. They wouldn't have reached such undesirable heights without a choke that registered in the top 5 this season, this game landing at number 3 on our podium. Which is why I skipped over the fact this game happened in Week 7, meaning that the Bobcats lost in heartbreaking fashion in 3 consecutive weeks, each collapse ranking high enough to be in the top 35 out of 130 registering games this season. It feels important to add some additional context as to just how impressive this really is. Visualized here is a histogram of RCS data compiled over the past 2 college football seasons. What this primarily reflects is the normal distribution of chokes falls heavily between an RCS of 0 and 6. The volume within this range is spread pretty evenly, which makes a lot of sense because, based on the way the score is calculated, just having a 51% chance to win at each of the observed points would net you an RCS above 2. Similarly, you could go a whole game without having a high win probability, and then still pull off something incredibly stupid. Sam Houston did this in Week 7 against JSU. SHSU scored an extremely low 0.77 RCS due to only having 2 observed points, both of them being prior to the start of the 4th quarter. Their big spike, in which they attained a 99.9% probability, came with just 15 seconds left. They had JSU at 4th and 2 on their own 25, up by just 1. Obviously, a field goal would win it for JSU. The odds are not in their favor. But JSU is clearly more acutely aware of this, as they call a draw on 4th and 2 to pick up 18 yards and at least move the chains before burning their second timeout. One play later, they get to the 40-yard line, marked by ESPN as the exact field goal target line, and utilize their final timeout. Head coach Charles Kelly isn't totally satisfied with the prospect of his kicker trying a 57-yarder to win the game. So with 5 seconds remaining, he sends his offense back on the field. No doubt surprised by this move, Sam Houston State head coach Phil Longo sees his defense seemingly out of position and calls timeout. His DBs were lined up 10 yards off the line of scrimmage. It'd probably be wise to play a little closer and not let a quick out move this field goal up. Good use of a timeout. Except, coming out of it, the DBs are lined up even further away, and leaving the boundary pretty much wide open. JSU capitalizes, picking up an easy 5 yards out of bounds.
I think a massive mistake to the boundary, especially. You've got to have somebody pressed up. There's got to be someone there. You see on the back end, Octavius Henderson. We'll see if it comes back to bite Sam Houston.
And the kick barely sneaks in thanks to that extra 5 yards. Unfortunately, what should have been calculated as a choke for JSU belongs solely to Sam Houston State. In another epic critique of my own system, you could technically score a 5.5 simply by having a 99% win probability at the 2-minute warning, even if you hadn't been projected to win at any other point in the game. This effectively happened in Week 11 during a game between Delaware and Louisiana Tech.
Delaware did secure an onside kick a couple weeks ago on the road. He'll change directions, looking to get a bounce. It's high. Delaware has it. Delaware!
Reed, who poetically converted the onside, goes on to nail a 51-yarder with the game on the line. LA Tech, along with Sam Houston State, were lucky that the metrics scored them more favorably, but unlucky in that I try not to let these things skip past me. I brought these games up to show that getting an RCS above 6 on its own is extremely noteworthy. Pulling it off multiple times this season is borderline maniacal. Doing it in back-to-back weeks, following it up with another high 5, damn near seems intentional. So let's demonstrate just how they scored their highest choke of the season. Right, so it's homecoming, and Texas State races out to a quick 28-7 lead in the first quarter alone. The heavily favored Bobcats are rewarded with a 96% win probability. Troy manages to claw their way back a bit and nails an impressive 53-yard field goal right before the break to cut the lead down to 14. Coming out of the half, they find a spark and punch in another touchdown. Because the Sun Belt is the only conference Troy has ever been a member of, they felt the need to catch Texas State with their pants down, which is exactly what they do when attempting a surprise onside kick drilled directly at one of the up men. I really love this strategy. It's a real shame the NFL has made this impossible. As for Texas State, you gotta remember to close the door before you get too excited. While they scramble to clean themselves up, Troy boots in another field goal to cut the lead to 4 and win probability to a lower point than it started the game at. The Bobcat offense hasn't been on the field in well over an hour at this point, thanks to commercials and halftime, but they're unfazed and manage to dial up 10 straight runs to extend the lead back to 11. Troy answers with a long drive and touchdown of their own, but having learned from their mistake a week ago in Jonesboro, Arkansas, Kenny's squad engineers a nearly 9-minute drive to inch this game closer to the finish, capping it off with a boot that provides a comfortable 8-point lead, giving them a lot more cushion than those 6 points the last time they had a late advantage. Surprisingly, Troy doesn't seem urgent to march down the field on their next drive, only getting off 4 plays in the 2 minutes leading to the recently adopted timeout. The stoppage awakes the Trojans, and in the 5 plays following, they only use 45 seconds before scoring an epic touchdown along with the necessary 2-point conversion to tie this game at 41 with a minute left in regulation. Texas State just experienced what can happen with a minute left, so they surely anticipated the potential game-winning drive ahead of them. Until their return man muffs the kickoff, forcing them to start the possession at their own 2. Kenny doesn't want to do anything crazy, and tries to just run out the clock. Troy's not having it. They use their timeouts, leading to a 3rd and 8 from the Bobcat 4 with just 19 ticks left. Texas State airs it out, and with a successful 31-yard completion is remotivated to thwart the comeback. 2 plays later, they pick up another 35 on a blown coverage. An opportunity now to kick a 42-yarder and wrap things up. A chance at redemption for their maligned kicker after last week's blunder. The broadcast shows him hyping himself up before the kick, in what I can only describe as a Cam Scatabo-esque emote. A late timeout by Troy gives him a free look at it, which he drills. This does little to settle his character as he continues swaggering about. Doink. On to overtime. I feel for the kid. It's brutal really, but what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. He wouldn't miss another kick all season. However, this shank would also prove costly, as DJ Epps hauls in another touchdown before the Bobcats get stuffed on a 4th and 1. Game over. Welcome to the Choker's Circle. These results do pave the way for our next Kicky Award, though, this honor being bestowed upon college kickers in general. While you could probably give this one out every year, I can't help but think of so many times I'd tune into the closing moments of a game only for a team to fall short because they failed to put the ball between the uprights. I mean, the postseason alone was marred by poor kicking performances. Ohio State missed a 27-yarder to tie the Big Ten championship game. Miami and Texas A&M combined for 4 missed field goals during their first-round game in College Station. Oklahoma's collapse after leading 17-0 early against Alabama was accentuated with 2 missed kicks late that would have kept the game within striking distance. Georgia missed a long one against Ole Miss, but had it been converted, the game likely goes to OT. Ohio State was bounced by Miami following a missed attempt at the end of the first half that would have at least given the Buckeyes some momentum going into the break. Instead, they were scoreless. And the same would happen to the Canes in the national championship game. A missed kick to end the half would leave them skunked instead of forcing a one-score game. And by the end, maybe Beck doesn't heave up an interception, but play more conservatively for the game-tying field goal attempt. I think a big reason kicking woes stood out to me this season was how routinely 50-yarders became in the NFL, even seeing guys line up from 60 with more regularity. So it just makes it a lot harder to watch a kid miss a 42-yarder with the game on the line, until you see Tyler Loop do it and remind everyone they're all human. Unfortunately for Texas State, their loss would draw the attention of some wondering why the Pac-12 would want such a program. Is that a UMass flair? Pot, meet kettle. Because our next Kicky Award belongs to the University of Massachusetts Minutemen. Their 0-12 campaign was so incredibly special, even by their standards, because their 2-win 2024 was aided by 2 wins over FCS opponents. In 2025, they lost to an FCS Bryant program that was not only coming off a 19-3 loss to New Mexico State, but would also go on to win just 2 other games all season. And they didn't just lose to Bryant, they blew a 20-3 lead to them, at home. Since 2012, with 5 seasons in the MAC and 9 as an independent, they've yet to achieve a season with greater than 5 wins. Per their Wikipedia, the Minutemen currently share rivalries with Boston College, UConn, and Buffalo, though the last one seems to be more of a recent fabrication. And while their matchup this season was the closest UMass would come to beating a fellow FBS opponent, this on its own would represent an absolutely massive choke. With a minute left, leading 21-20, UMass would intercept Buffalo on an errant third down pass. The UMass radio broadcast would suggest that this play would seal it.
To seal it for the Minutemen!
And mark the Minutemen's first home win against an FBS opponent since they hosted UConn in 2021. That's right, 4 full calendar years since they last won in front of a home crowd against a school in the same league. Though they'd be penalized for excessive celebration following the turnover. The first-year head coach would call 2 runs before deciding to call a pass on 3rd and 24, ensuring Buffalo would still have a timeout after the punt. Of all the ridiculous play-calling decisions we've seen over the past 2 seasons, this one's definitely up there. The radio broadcast acknowledges how premature the jubilation may have been. After the punt, Buffalo has the ball at midfield, trailing by 2.
A case of the oh no's, not again here in Amherst.
The Bulls find pay dirt a few plays later, and add a 2-point conversion for good measure.
Unfathomable unless you're a UMass fan. Maybe one of the top 3 most difficult defeats this team has seen in the last 25 years.
UMass was a decent FCS program prior to their transition to the big leagues, but unlike other programs that have made the jump, they've struggled. Visualized here is the win percentage of every team that has made the transition from FCS to FBS between 1988 and 2018. As you can see, some teams have really capitalized on the advantages provided by the prestige that comes with elevated exposure. Boise State, for instance, has won the Mountain West 6 times, competed in numerous New Year's Six Bowls, and even appeared in the college football playoff last season. The Broncos no doubt exist as a bit of an outlier, but 19 of the 22 programs have at least won a single conference championship during their D1 existence. Even still, maybe that's a bad benchmark, as UMass has only been in the conference for 5 of their 14 seasons. But being independent isn't an excuse, and it shouldn't serve any benefit either. That's why I'm also giving a kickie to Notre Dame. Join a conference and stop bitching. Were the Irish one of the best 12 teams at the end of the season? Probably, but we need more of a resume than wins over the worst team in the Big Ten or SEC, and anyone from the 2025 ACC, other than Miami, who they conveniently lost to. Anyway, I won't dignify them with further criticism. Back to UMass. Their transition to FBS was allegedly highly researched and anticipated for a long time. The goal was to continue the upward trajectory of the program for years to come. The way school's officials discussed joining the MAC, you could tell they almost thought of it as a stepping stone. They even announced they'd be playing their games in Gillette Stadium for a few years while they renovated their on-campus stadium, a venue that sits almost 2 whole hours from their campus in Amherst. I guess some of the justification related to the larger alumni base of UMass students in the greater Boston area compared to the less populated western parts of the state, but this effort almost completely alienated the team from their on-campus students being able to support the team. They've since adapted and in 2025 played all of their home games in Amherst. Regardless, the Minutemen are far and away one of the least successful programs to ever grace the sport. It's almost hard to even put in perspective. Sports Reference suggests their all-time win percentage is .275, though nearly 2/3 of their accredited wins came from before the forward pass was even legal. The 16-5 since rejoining D1 FBS in 2012 is so incredibly bad that to even tie the next closest team, they would need 2 13-win undefeated seasons, while Charlotte went winless or close to it. To catch a program that isn't younger than them, they'd need 3 straight undefeated seasons, while Kent State would have to similarly go winless. Returning to the MAC, at least they have the chance to play Kent State and try to ensure that they stay at the bottom of CFB with the Minutemen. Except this season they'd get blown out 42-6, with the difference between the 2 perpetual bottom feeders growing even more thanks in part to a 5-win season by Kent State, marking an incredible turnaround. The Golden Flashes did try to help out last season by going winless themselves. They even lost to an FCS school that announced they'd be jumping straight from D1 to D3 due to their inability to keep up with the NIL landscape. Speaking of NIL, I'm going to take a minute to announce a few channel updates. A few of y'all have asked if there are ways to support the channel, and I can't express enough how motivating that is. I've set up a Ko-fi for anyone looking to help grow the Nuans NIL budget, and anybody that donates will be included as a sponsor for my next project. I have a fun plan to integrate sponsors into the actual visuals, meaning it won't just be something that flashes on the screen at the end of the video. So if you want a special name other than what's shown in the account, just include that in the message. I think I'm still kind of learning here. I've also started a free Patreon, totally free, no tiers, just a way to connect and build community. There you'll be able to watch videos early and ad-free, engage in discussions about upcoming projects, or anything really, vote on topics you want to see covered, and see some bonus content that usually stems from projects I don't think deserve a spot on the channel. For instance, I spent a couple weeks building a follow-up to the onside kick vid after that Saturday in Soldier Field, before deciding I'd rather just move on. And there are a number of other short projects I want to make content on, but don't think are worthy of a full deep dive or Google Earth world building. Anyway, I can't say it'll be free forever, but I plan on always having a free tier, and if you want to get in on the ground floor, now's the chance. Back to UMass. Other than their success in the FCS, the one nugget they used to hang on to was their rivalry against UConn, which they held the all-time series lead in, until 2024 when UConn tied it. And based on this thread from a few seasons ago, it's not even really a rivalry. Which makes sense. However, one thing fans of bad programs can take solace in is making fun of other teams' shortcomings, and UConn definitely has plenty of those. The Huskies don't have to be honored with a kickie because they earned the bronze medal in choking this season. It almost seems as if whenever they would choke, it would be in an act of solidarity with their fellow New England football team. See, it wasn't that long ago that UConn also bottomed out as a program. This didn't come as a big surprise. It was ironically the trajectory that they'd been on since their last season in the Big East in 2012, a conference they had actually won as recently as 2010 with head coach Randy Edsall, who spent over a decade in East Hartford. Since leaving the old conference for about 7 years in the American, before becoming an independent, they've only won about 29% of their games. Though, much to the chagrin of UMass, Jim Elmora would be hired to take over after the return of Randy Edsall was ended 2 games into the 2021 season. His 4-season second tenure had resulted in a 6-36 record. This Jim Mora is the son of the other Jim Mora.
Playoffs?
Though he's technically not a junior because of the middle initial, very much like an H.W. Bush situation. Anyway, he's been a really good hire, leading the Huskies to their first bowl win since 2009 and first 9-win season since 2007. This season, UConn wouldn't get out of their own way, resulting in an unbelievable regular season mark, losing 3 games in overtime, all games they had led at some point in the second half, only to allow the game to be tied and fail to win after the end of regulation. These failures accounted for all 3 of the Huskies' regular season losses, with them winning every game that seeded after the fourth quarter. In Week 2, they wouldn't let UMass's loss to Bryant go uncontested, notching a 10.2 RCS when visiting upstate New York. For those keeping track at home, that'll appear the highest RCS we've seen to this point, but you'll have to consider the qualitative demerits that can be applied to this matchup. While the Huskies did blow a 17-6 fourth quarter lead, they were actually losing by 3 with 48 seconds to play. It took a 4th and 10 miracle throw and catch to help set up what would be the game-tying field goal, ultimately taking the game to OT. Their 4 punts in the final frame were obviously not all that sexy, but I wouldn't consider them catastrophic either. In fact, I'd say Florida's choke to USF later that same night was more laughable, recalling the boneheaded spit take that aided in the Bulls' upset in Gainesville. UConn would visit Delaware the following week and get into a shootout with Joe Flacco's old team, but I think ESPN's win probability was a bit harsh and underestimated the Blue Hens playing in their second FBS game. Though the Huskies did give up 2 fourth-down conversions on Delaware's game-tying drive, which prompted their second overtime defeat in as many weeks, Mora's squad would respond well, rattling off 4 straight wins before visiting Rice. They'd struggle in the second half, allowing the Owls to force OT, which naturally spelled disaster for UConn. By season's end, Jim Mora would be the target of a few hungry programs, and eventually accept the opening at Colorado State. In turn, UConn would pursue and hire Jason Candle from Toledo, perhaps not realizing that Jason Candle is responsible for the 8th worst choking team of 2025, and 9th worst of the past 2 seasons combined, ironically just behind the Jim Mora-led Huskies. Earlier in this season, when I was attempting to keep up with a weekly series, we reviewed Toledo's stunning choke to Western Michigan, a game that scored an RCS higher than 3 that I awarded with a top 5 appearance. There was something about the qualitative analysis here that left a lot to be desired. Maybe it was the 14-13 final score, maybe it was the fact that everyone seemed to expect this from Jason Candle, or maybe it was the fact that Western Michigan would go on to win the MAC this year. Regardless, I couldn't help but laugh when I saw UConn had traded in one major choking hazard for another. But hey, at least they didn't lose to an FCS team like UMass. Speaking of FCS teams, it's impossible to ignore how crazy the FCS postseason was. It graced us with 5 chokes alone, including an insane national championship game hosted at Vanderbilt that needed overtime to be decided, a 28-point comeback by Yale against Youngstown State, and even a game that registered in our top 5 on the season. I do need to add a disclaimer that I only considered or reviewed FCS games that occurred in the postseason. I'm sure the regular season is chock full of crazy storylines itself, but adding another 129 teams to the tracker sounds like a whole other project in itself, especially considering how hard it can be to find reliable highlights of FBS programs. So maybe another time. Anyway, we'll make an exception for the FCS playoffs because non-CFP bowl games are way too lame to be considered. Because there's nothing like Youngstown State hosting an Ivy League program, generating a 35-7 halftime lead, and then blowing it so hard that by the time the 2-minute warning rolls around, they've already started playing from behind. This really has to be one of my favorite graphs from the past 2 seasons in relation to its RCS. It's almost as bad as UTSA's collapsed against Tulsa last season, except instead of getting some recognition with an all-time RCS, they were already choking at the last checkpoint. Somehow I don't even consider that the worst choke of the FCS playoffs. That honor belongs to our second worst single game choke of the year, from the 10-time FCS national champion North Dakota State Bison. Oh, you thought you could just announce your switch to FBS when I was in post?
Pain and suffering!
Now, I'm fairly confident you've seen clips of the viral moment when Illinois State ended the Bison season, the first out of 15 consecutive campaigns in which NDSU failed to qualify for the FCS quarterfinals, also making it the first time they ever qualified for the FCS playoffs to be bounced before the quarterfinals. The move to the FBS comes at a time when North Dakota State feels they've become a victim of their own success. Much like the Patriots fans that clamor how Drake May and Mike Vrabel will have an easy time returning to the Super Bowl after their recent dismantling at the hands of the Seattle Seahawks, sometimes an overwhelming amount of success in such a short yet sustained period begets unrealistic expectations. When winning your league every season becomes the benchmark and not the pinnacle, stakeholders are forced to up the ante, doing anything they can to retain interest while juggling the balance between remaining competitive and quelling those expectations. Since joining the FCS ranks in 2006, they've won 85% of their games. Since 2011, that number is up to 90%. And it's not like they spend all their time beating up on vastly inferior competition either. They compete in the Missouri Valley Conference, a unit composed of their rivals at UND, South Dakota State, Youngstown State, and even Illinois State. Many of these programs are also reliably present in the FCS postseason, only to often have those campaigns ended by their rivals at NDSU. And NDSU didn't shy away from scheduling FBS schools either. In fact, it was almost the opposite. They have a 9-4 record against FBS opponents all time, and even went on a 6-game win streak from 2010 to 2016, which led FBS teams to stop scheduling the Bison altogether, because why would you add an absolute serial killer to your schedule if you don't have to? Playing them serves almost nothing to gain, as you either beat an FCS opponent, to which everyone balks at, or you lose to them and become a laugh for everyone that understands NDSU as a good program, but still thinks it's funny because at the end of the day it kind of is. The 2020s have been particularly tough on the Bison, only winning 2 of the possible 5 FCS national titles in that span. So this season, in response to winning a national championship the year before, but having lost 2 games in the 2024 regular season, they decide to go undefeated, outscoring their opponents by 366 points with an average margin of victory exceeding 30. Hosting a 9-4 Illinois State team that not only did they already beat 33-16 on the road, but also barely even made the playoffs after sneaking in as one of the last 4 teams in. In their last game of the regular season, Illinois State got blown out at home against Southern Illinois. Naturally, the spread on this game favored NDSU by 23.5 points, because this is a Bison team that at one point before the playoffs was considered a -290 favorite to win the whole damn tournament, as if it might as well have been a foregone conclusion. The start of the game would lend itself to whatever preconceived notions Vegas and casual viewers alike may have had. In the first 20 minutes, NDSU scores a 1-play touchdown on their first play from scrimmage, returns a punt for another 7, and intercepts Illinois State's gunslinger QB, Tommy Rittenhouse, 3 times, with the third one being returned for another score. Somehow, the Redbirds wouldn't lose their composure, as their following drive would span over 7 minutes and 80 yards to pull the game within 1 possession before halftime. No doubt a manageable deficit, but this is the best scoring defense in FCS, and 3rd best scoring offense. The ISU defense would start the 3rd quarter forcing a quick punt, only for their quarterback to offer up his 4th interception of the afternoon. It would be extremely difficult to criticize the Illinois State coaching staff if they decided to bench their starter after yet another giveaway, being that 4 of their 8 offensive possessions have ended with Rittenhouse gifting the ball to a team that you simply cannot make mistakes against. Unfazed by their offensive struggles, the Redbird defense once again forces the vaunted NDSU offense to punt after just 3 snaps. Rittenhouse returns to the field, and once again engineers a lengthy drive into the Bison red zone, only for the drive to come up empty after getting stuffed on a 4th and 1 from the 10. Fargo Dome fanatics finally see their offense put together a decent series, but are again forced to watch their punter take the field, a player whose name they probably don't know at all because this offense is so used to having their way. The punt pins ISU deep, eventually leading to a 3rd and 11. For an astonishing 5th time this game, Rittenhouse is intercepted, and the struggling Bison offense is set up inside the 5, where they waste no time taking a 14-point lead and 97% win probability. This time, the Redbird offense wouldn't respond with a lengthy drive, going 3 and out, gracing the Bison with the coveted 99% mark. Perhaps even more incredibly, the Illinois State defense would come up with another quick 3 and out. With time waning in the 4th quarter, another healthy drive sees ISU stuffed in a goal-to-go situation, turning the ball over on downs. This should be game over, but the Redbird defense that allowed 33 points in their last meeting is more than inspired. And why wouldn't they be? They've hardly allowed NDSU to do anything. Outside of the first play from scrimmage, they've given up only 56 yards. The scoreboard might show 28 points allowed, but one of those scores was a punt return, another from a pick six, and the most recent points after a drive NDSU started on their 5. So it should be no surprise that once again they stifle their opponents, sending the punt unit back onto the field in 3 quick plays, marking the Bison's 5th 3-and-out of the game. For reference, this NDSU team entered the game scoring a touchdown on 52% of their drives, a regular season mark nearly identical to FBS national champions Indiana, who ran through their schedule much like the Bison. Compelled by Illinois State's defense, I wanted to know how many times NDSU went 3-and-out all season. In their 12 regular season games, it only happened a whopping 16 times. Now, maybe it's underwhelming to hear that ISU had already forced 5 3-and-outs when it occurred 16 other times, but what's truly wild is that if you filter for games that weren't completely out of hand, i.e. within 17 or fewer points, that number drops down to 6. ISU nearly forced the number 3 ranked offense in FCS to match their season total in quick, empty drives during a competitive game. The same ISU defense that failed to generate a single 3-and-out during the entirety of their previous meeting. I really feel like there's going to be some of you out there that don't understand how insane this is, but that's okay. What the Redbirds defense did is the story. It's one thing to force punts, but anybody with half an ounce of clock management acumen knows how important every first down can be when it comes to TOP. The Redbirds would finish this game having been in possession for over 70% of the game, nearly a full extra quarter. And when you achieve that, it seldom matters who you're playing, your quarterback is allowed to throw 5 interceptions and still be called upon to try and win the game. A solid punt return sets up Rittenhouse in decent field position. 7 plays later, they finally managed to capitalize on a drive inside the NDSU red zone with a spectacular throw and catch. Though with less than 3 to play, win probability still sits above 94%. A re-energized defense relished the opportunity, and on a 3rd and 4 wouldn't even give the NDSU punter a chance when a strip sack starts ISU deep in Bison territory. The atmosphere in Normal, Illinois was anything but, especially as their team gets set for a 4th and goal from the North Dakota State 6. Rittenhouse escapes the pressure that's harassed him all day and finds a receiver in the back of the end zone. What do you do with a chance to pull off one of the greatest upsets and comebacks in the history of college football? You put your sack on the table and go for 2, which is exactly what longtime coach Brock Spack does. The tight ends both release, allowing one to create just enough separation to give ISU their first lead of the game with just 55 seconds on the clock. After throwing 5 interceptions, Tommy Rittenhouse not only throws a clutch touchdown pass to potentially tie, but adds the lead-taking 2-point conversion. Even with all 3 timeouts and plenty of time, only needing a field goal, win probability swings heavily in favor of ISU. The Bison are forced to bring in their backup quarterback after the starter exited the game following the fumble. He'd find a way to get the ball up near midfield before turning the ball over on downs with just a few ticks to go, because this defense was never going to let this one get out of their hands, allowing Tommy Rittenhouse to kneel out the game despite his 5 interceptions, knowing full well that this once-in-a-lifetime victory was made possible by the guys on defense. The Redbirds would leverage this win into an extremely impressive playoff run that took them to damn near every corner of the contiguous United States. Having started their playoffs by visiting Southeast Louisiana an hour outside New Orleans, traveling to Fargo, North Dakota a week later, earning a trip to Sacramento, California to face off against UC Davis, a game that they mostly dominated but then sent them all the way outside Philadelphia to face off against Villanova in the semifinals. The Wildcats earned their spot by upsetting Lehigh on the road, though instead of making a pilgrimage, they would have just taken a bus to travel the 60 miles to that campus. Villanova would return home against ISU, riding a 23-game home win streak with a trip to the Natty on the line. But in this semifinal, the Redbirds would dominate, winning 30-14 in a game that was never particularly close, sending Illinois State to their first Natty since 2014 when they lost a heartbreaker to Carson Wentz and NDSU. This time headed to First Bank Stadium in Nashville, Tennessee.
On 4th and 1. Dawson shifts, they throw, End zone. Caught. Touchdown. They get it snapped. Pressure comes. The pass is caught. And again, it's Lord. Still on his feet. Inside the 5. Lord. Touchdown. Snap. Hold. Kick is blocked. It's on the turf. It's scooped up. Kicking game, obviously a factor in overtime. First and goal. Play fake. Lord, another catch. Lord breaks a tackle. Touchdown. This is obviously crucial. Not a great snap, and this one's blocked. On 4th down in overtime, they bring pressure. Lamson throws. End zone. Caught. Touchdown. Snap, hold, kick. Up. Good. For a national championship.
The plight of the college kicker, man. It has to be one of the most thankless jobs you could have. And while the result is immeasurable heartbreak for fans of Illinois State in a national championship, so very worthy of the instant classic title, the run they had to even make the final was nothing short of remarkable. Hats off. The FCS has become a lot more captivating in recent years. 2025 saw a record-setting number of matchups between FCS and FBS teams. Not that the FCS would get a record-setting number of wins. If I had to guess, this consistent increase in games will only continue as schools gamify their schedules and calculate the expected revenue associated with a playoff berth against the benefit of an out-of-conference Power 4 opponent, paving the way to discuss the worst choking team, who also conveniently would be responsible for the single worst choke of 2025. Army. Now, I can't lie, I spent a lot of time trying to find a compelling narrative to explain how the Black Knights went from 12-2 in their first year as a non-independent program to being a 7-6 squad responsible for the worst chokes of the year title. In the past 2 seasons, I've come to find there almost always seems to be something that stands out. Like UConn losing all their games in OT, or Texas State choking in 3 consecutive weeks. Even Arkansas's tumultuous existence since the turn of the millennium, all of which serve as great jumping-off points. I thought, maybe we can just point to former quarterback Bryson Daly's exit, along with 21 other graduating seniors. Losing that amount of production would always be tough to replace. But just losing more games doesn't guarantee that you'll do so in crushing fashion. UMass lost twice as many games and only choked half as much. So maybe I could add in Army's experience with the portal. Losing RB1 Kanye Udo to Arizona State and all-conference linebacker Elo Madozi to Georgia, while not being able to replace production by bringing anybody in. Again, that doesn't exactly translate to choking. So then I defaulted to kicking. That was a big reason for one of their chokes here, but special teams wasn't exactly a great unit for Army last year, and their field goal percentage wasn't drastically different year over year. Same with turnovers. They usually play a big role in a team's success, except in Army's case, they had an identical turnover margin per game in both 24 and 25. One thing I kept coming back to was passing the football. Most people would perk up and say, Army barely ever passes the football. They run the triple option like most service academies, and that'd be correct. In both 24 and 25, they ran the ball almost twice as much as the average college football team. While they averaged a much more pedestrian yards per rush in 2025, they still finished in the top half of the country. I really wanted to find the underlying story that in no uncertain terms explained what catalyzed such a drastic change and chokes. For a while, I looked at passing yards per attempt, which did drop off a bit, but with their small sample size, it didn't really register as significant. Interceptions were major players, but only for some of the losses. They threw roughly the same number of ints per attempt as last season. After spending more days trying to find the story for Army than I did trying to build this entire project in Google Earth, and before just resorting to jokes about Venezuela and Greenland, I realized that throughout my entire analysis of the past 2 seasons, choking seemed to be contagious. One of the reasons that so many of these stories weave together is how a single collapse is able to infect whoever and whatever it touches. Of the 74 FBS teams that choked this season, half of them would be guilty of more than one infraction. Just looking back at those in the top 5 single games, 4 of them would be responsible for more than one choke. We can jump over to New Mexico State too. Even in 2 different seasons, they found themselves guilty of choking to the exact same team with almost the exact same RCS. And after the Aggies' visit to Lynchburg, Liberty came down with the case of the Crocs, a few weeks later managing to choke 3 of their last 4. Or my Gamecocks choked to A&M. It came just a couple weeks after falling apart late against Alabama. I try to refrain from too much of this butterfly effect thinking, But perhaps if Sellers doesn't fumble late in a tied game and instead manages to lead a game-winning drive, maybe a few weeks later in College Station, the team avoids a similar fate. And I don't feel hyperbolic saying it's contagious. It really feels like the only way to rid yourself of the virus is by passing it on to someone else, seemingly what Texas State did when they righted the ship by blowing out Charles Huff's Southern Miss team. The team that was in the driver's seat for a Sun Belt Conference Championship appearance at 5-0, whose wheels came off after contracting whatever funk passed on by the Bobcats. Or we can look at Mike Loxley's Maryland squad. They mirrored Texas State's woes by also choking in weeks 6, 7, and 8, never managing to get healthy by losing the rest of their games by double digits. Joined by Penn State and San Jose State, who also went back-to-back in weeks 7 and 8. Then there's Pitt, who choked in consecutive games to West Virginia and Louisville before rattling off 5 straight wins, while Louisville would go on to find themselves ranked in the top 15 before inevitably choking to Cal and Clemson, with the Tigers seemingly making up for their choke against Duke, while the Blue Devils followed up their impressive comeback by falling apart against UConn. We also have LA Tech, who came down with a fever, only for it to break when they met a similarly ill Liberty team. And Memphis, who helped catalyze Arkansas's downfall, setting themselves up well in the American Conference, only to choke while ranked visiting a 2-4 UAB team before slightly rebounding, only to have their hearts ripped out shortly after by losing against Tulane, the first of a 4-game losing streak to end the season. Even with the FCS teams we barely looked at, only focusing on the postseason, where Illinois State would pull off the impossible just to find themselves on the wrong side of a heart-wrenching loss in the Natty. The overarching lesson is that there's no good side of a choke. You don't want to appear in a game that registers an RCS at all. Less than 20% of teams that have found themselves on the right side of one of these graphs have been able to fend off contracting the virus. And that's just on paper. A team like Michigan may have avoided getting mapped, but Sharon Moore made up for their lack of inclusion here. Kentucky may not have registered on the wrong side, but I doubt any Big Blue donors are proud of how the last 2 seasons have gone. Because at the end of the day, choking is just contagious. But it's something Army must have picked up more organically. Week 1, registering the only choke of the week, they'd fall to the FCS Tarleton State Texans, thanks in large part to ending 3 consecutive second-half drives with turnovers. They'd try to right the ship before the end of the game, only for their kicker to miss a would-be game winner, as well as their try during the second overtime, allowing the Texans to finish off the upset. There was nothing particularly special about how they did it, just seemingly a regular, run-of-the-mill choke. And in week 2, you could argue that maybe they got the monkey off their back. They went to Kansas and came away with a win against KSU, in large part due to possessing the ball for almost 27 of the final 30 minutes. But somewhere along the way, they'd pick it back up. Maybe one of those cadets forgot to wash their hands. Because fast forward to week 8 when they'd go on to visit Tulane, and despite having a lead late in the game, dominating time of possession as they so often do, they'd allow a touchdown scoring drive to tie the game at 17. And on the ensuing drive, they'd commit to their run game that is often so effective. But John Summerall wasn't going to let the Black Knights run out the clock. I'd argue for all the times Army could have passed the ball, this was screaming as an opportunity. And yet they'd end their drive by taking up only 17 seconds. Tulane would catch a break with an insane touchdown pass and catch to take the lead late. Game over. Here's another 6-point giblet on your Crocs. Weeks would go by where they seemingly avoided any issues, until their last home game of the season in Mechie Stadium against a lowly Tulsa team, a game that would result in the worst scoring choke of the entire 2025 season. A heavily favored Army team would find themselves with a 2-score lead well into the 4th quarter. In their previous game against Temple, they'd get the ball with a 1-point lead and 10 minutes remaining. They were able to effectively run the ball and end the game with an 18-play drive. After letting up a field goal late to bring Tulsa within 8, on 2nd and 10, they'd trivially go back to the air, throwing a ball into double coverage that is impressively intercepted by the Tulsa defender. 5 plays later, Tulsa would convert that mistake into a touchdown, just inside the 2-minute warning. But the Black Knights would stuff the 2-point conversion attempt and maintain the lead with a chance to once again ice things. Tulsa would of course go for the onside kick, only for it to bounce unsuccessful. Army, with a chance to end the game, knowing that almost all of their drives throughout the entire season last longer than 2 minutes, would find themselves in a 4th and 3 situation at the Tulsa 39. Electing to try and win the game right there, they'd go for it. The team that routinely averages one of the higher yards per carry in the nation would get stuffed by a 3-win Hurricane team. It would take them all of 4 plays and 32 seconds to get inside the Army red zone, forcing Jeff Monken to burn his timeouts and try to give his cadets one last possession. Unfortunately for them, they'd get the ball with only 12 seconds remaining. And when your team never passes the ball to begin with, this one was already done. Tulsa, responsible for being the winning team in the highest recorded RCS of both the past 2 seasons, would celebrate once again pulling off the incredible double-digit RCS by choking themselves in the following week against that lowly UAB team, while Army would bounce back against UTSA, putting them and Jeff Traylor back on the map. That same UTSA team that was similarly victimized by Tulsa a year ago. But being that Army would have one more regular season game, they'd once again find themselves on the wrong side of a choke by ending the year the way they started it, throwing a costly fourth quarter interception to give up the lead and never get it back, leaving us with just a single kicky to give out. And while there is certainly no shortage of contenders, like the kid from Florida who spit on a USF player, or Penn State losing to UCLA, the entire state of South Carolina for having their Heisman and national title expectations ended before we even finished the month of October. But being that this award is more subjective in nature, I'd like to use it as an opportunity to acknowledge where I was sorely mistaken. That, of course, being in regard to Lane Kiffin and his character. Last season, I spent a good amount of time dragging Kiffin during the section about Ole Miss's choke against LSU. I called him out for his rapid ascension in coaching being closely tied to Pete Carroll, and of course his relationship with Lane's father, Monty. Further acknowledging his poor tenure in Oakland, albeit that lasted longer than Pete's. His swift departure from Tennessee, but not before leaving his mark on the SEC. The tarmacking at LAX, his, at the time, tumultuous relationship with Nick Saban, whose coaching tree is deserving of an entire docuseries at this point. Into his success at FAU that led to the Ole Miss hire. I followed that up with an entire video documenting Lane's story to that point, but had almost entirely changed my tune. By the end, I took the bait hook, line, and sinker. Lane had spent most of the offseason on a PR campaign to build up his reputation. His appearances on The Pivot with Ryan Clark and this past weekend with Theo Vaughn had me singing his praises as evidence that people can change for the better. The saga that transpired this season, as his team was in the midst of the best campaign in program history, undid a lot of that favor. Not only did he end up leaving his squad before a trip to the college football playoff, but he did so in a way that soured pretty much everyone outside Baton Rouge. He made it all about him. As his players were actively preparing for games that have a huge bearing on their future, Kiffin was the center of a media frenzy hell-bent on figuring out where his future would be. He did little to downplay things too, constantly stoking the flames on X and whenever he did speak to the media. I don't want to make too many broad statements about the guy. It seems like whenever I do, he immediately changes tune. I could call him a monster, and a week later he'd do something heroic. I could call him an onside kick, but then 3 days later he'd show up. At the end of the day, he made us both look like clowns, and for that, we have to share the golden kicky this year. One conclusion I will draw from observing the career of Kiffin is that while people can change who they are, a tiger can't change his stripes. Thanks for watching.